Hi everyone, my name is Bailey Selforce and welcome to week 2 of How to Be an Activist 101. In this training this week, we're going to be talking about effective storytelling. So we're going to be creating impact through stories. So what is storytelling? Well, in short, it's a compelling way to spread information. It's not just data or facts or statistics. It's, making a connection with people and telling a story to really get their engagement. And humans have been doing storytelling since the dawn of time. You think back to, different cultures, and throughout time there's been hieroglyphics and, ways to communicate, and that was all storytelling. So it's very natural as a human to, do storytelling and to tell stories. But in this training today, we're going to be talking about how to do so effectively in order to, engage your audience and really bring more people towards OneUpAction and your specific chapter. So moving on to our agenda. Today we're going to be talking about, what is storytelling, which I kind of already talked about. Why is storytelling important? What is the process of telling great stories? And what are some tips on how you can connect with your followers? So I really hope that this training is going to be helpful for you all, and I can't wait to share all this information with you. So thank you for tuning in to week 2 of How to Be an Activist 101. Let's get started. Okay, so storytelling is all about playing your part. And it's all about trying to connect with different people around you. So by this image, these little cartoon people, it's telling you that your audience is going to be totally diverse in, their mood, their job, how they're feeling on that day. So it's really important to, do storytelling in order to connect with all different types of people. Some of the people that you might be trying to engage might, be in a bad attitude or be in a good attitude, and you have to be able to cater to all of those different types of people. And storytelling is one of the best ways that you can connect with, people from all different types of walks of life or careers or, ages. So if you're trying to connect with, youth or adults, all of this has in common is storytelling. And so today we're just going to be showing you, how to do that and how to do so effectively. Okay, let's move on. So storytelling adds value. And what I mean by that is if someone is emotionally invested in what you're telling them, it creates value and it makes them, interested and wanting to engage with you. And so I have a quote on this page that says, "Stories are such a powerful driver of emotional value that their effort on any given object's subjective value can actually be measured objectively." And this is from two guys, Joshua Glenn and Rob Walker. And their story is actually really inspiring and unique. So what these two guys did is, sorry, just one second. Okay, so the whole story of Joshua Glenn and Rob Walker is that they bought junk on eBay. So they bought, a bunch of these random objects on eBay, so they bought them online, and they spent no more than $2 on each item. So they bought a whole bunch of different items, and they ended up spending about $129 on all of these just random pieces of junk. And to most people, that would be worthless. But what they did is that they went back on eBay, they went back online, and put backstories on each of the objects. And they essentially did storytelling online to sell these products again. And they shared the history of the product and the importance of, the product. And they were just ordinary things. But these two guys gave them backstories. And due to the backstories, they didn't change the objects at all. All they did was add in a description of the history and importance of the object. And they ended up reselling all of these objects and ended up making about $8,000. So I think that that is one of, such a key example of how storytelling really affects the human mind because it's so natural to us. And if you can really tap into, that in another person, then you're going to create value. And for in this instance, it was actually, monetary value that they created. But in other instances, it's emotional at value, or it's a connection that creates value. So it doesn't always have to do with money. A lot of it is just the symbol of you take these objects and you add a story, and suddenly they're worth so much more because people are invested. And that is the whole premise of what we're trying to do here in this training, is talking about how can we get other people emotionally invested in joining OneUpAction. What are we going to say to them? How are we going to engage with them to make them want to be part of our organization? And as we go through this training, I really want you to think about how are we going to add value, and how is our storytelling going to essentially make something that might be small into something so big. And that is one of our key ideas here at OneUpAction, is that everything starts small. But if we can reach out to more people, and one of the ways to do that is through storytelling, but engaging more people, then suddenly we'll have a whole movement, and a big movement. And I think that this example of Joshua Glenn and Rob Walker is super inspiring, and I hope you guys liked this example. So moving on, I'm going to switch my little camera here so you guys can read this. Why is storytelling important to OneUpAction? So first off, facts and statistics are everywhere, and people don't know what to do with so much data. So, in today's day and age, we're hit with facts from left and right. We see all of these statistics on our Instagrams, on our, news articles that come in, on the news, CNN updates, and everyone is just throwing out all of this information. And it's like, what are you supposed to do with that? Sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. And people don't know what to do with all of this information being thrown at them. And sometimes they just need to connect with another human, and connect via, a story or a message to really understand those facts and the data that, is connected to that story. So secondly, we need to differentiate ourselves, and the way that we do that is by creating compelling content. So, I'm sure that you all follow our social media, and especially on social media, like what I said before, it's all very similar for, environmental organizations. So how does OneUpAction, stand out? How do we make ourselves different from other climate organizations or other social justice organizations? And one of the ways that we can do that is through storytelling, which is why this training is so important. And by creating compelling content, we get people engaged. We get people, so interested, and they want to join a chapter so bad, and they want to, do action and help the community. And this is just such a simple way to get people engaged. And, on Instagram, you might see stories about our different chapter leads, or, some quotes from important people in the movement. And that's one of, those kind of messages go along with storytelling. Because if our Instagram was just loaded with statistics and, percentages about the climate crisis, people wouldn't understand and they would essentially get bored. And by creating, a story and a message, you're really engaging people and you're making those deeper connections so it sits with them longer. Okay, so number 3, we strive to connect with each person that's passionate about the environment. So, there's a lot of people that we know that are passionate about the environment, but they might not know how to get involved, or, they might not know how to make sense of all the information. And so we want to connect with those people that might not be educated on the climate crisis to the extent that, our chapter leads are, or maybe have never gone into activism before. So how do we connect with those people? And it's really all about building connections. But you can't build a connection by just throwing some facts at some people. So storytelling is, one of the key ways to make that connection, because you're really, it's a conversation. You're telling them a story, but you're also getting a story back when they engage back with you. And so we really want to connect with those people that have like-minded views, or, even the people that don't have like-minded views. We want to connect with them to maybe, bring light to a situation or help them learn more about the climate crisis. And you can't, do that by just, hitting them with a bunch of information. So number 4, we also want to bring new people into our family that might be overwhelmed by the surplus of information. So like I just said, there's information coming at us all the time on social media, on just the news and stuff like that. And so that can be really overwhelming for some people. And I know personally that was super overwhelming for me before I joined a specific movement. I saw all these facts about the environment, about environmental degradation and deforestation and all of these things, but I had no connection of like what do I do about it? Who do I contact? And so by doing effective storytelling and getting our message out there, you're connecting with those people that might be overwhelmed. And because, you guys are already chapter leads or already involved in the organization, you might have had a similar experience to what I was just talking about. You might have felt overwhelmed and you didn't know how to take action. And, there's no way to do that if all you have is the facts. You need to be able to connect with people. You need to, foster a learning environment. And that is really one of the key parts of OneUpAction, is fostering that environment of learning and bringing new people into our family. Okay, so number 5, storytelling is a way to connect with people on a deeper level. So what I've been saying, if you're just having a very surface level conversation with someone, it might not get them totally engaged, or, they might not be, driven to automatically join your chapter or automatically get involved. But storytelling, it connects you. It creates a bond between two people or one person and an audience, because suddenly they're invested in what you're saying. And that connection on a deeper level really creates value and, makes people want to join and take action and gets people really excited. And that is one of, such as the key points at OneUpAction, is that we're all about building connections. We are a family and we strive to push that we care about everyone in our organization. We are spread out all around the world. And we don't look at that as a setback, due to communication errors or, sometimes the struggles of communicating internationally. we look at that diversity and we're so proud of it. And we try to connect with each one of our members on a deep level and really, understand them and understand their stories. And if you can do that with new people that are interested in joining your chapter, they will be that much more likely to, take action and actually join. Okay. Moving on. So what are the 3 steps of effective storytelling? Number 1, build the connection. So build that deep bond between, you and your audience, whether that be one person or a group of people. Number 2, tell the story. So this is pretty simple, but there is actually a sort of formula for telling your story effectively. And if you have that formula and you have the knowledge of what's going to draw people in, then that's going to be really key in your storytelling experience. And number 3, deliver with confidence. So we really want to emphasize that you should be, trying to build your confidence through this whole training course on how to be an activist, but also in your everyday life. You want to go out into the world as a OneUpAction member and be so confident about your views and, how OneUpAction is different from other environmental organizations, and confident with the facts on why other people should join OneUpAction. And so, if you go up to someone and you're so passionate and excited and confident, how are they not going to want to join? How are they not going to, want to become part of the OneUpAction family? And we think that, trying to build up that confidence and build up that how you present your story is almost as key as figuring out how to tell your story. Because if you're very, shy or you don't deliver it well, they might not connect with it. So trying to create that confidence and the skill level to deliver those stories effectively is also super important. Okay, so the next slide is about golden circles. So it's all about the why. Why are you telling this story? Why are you trying to get audiences engaged? Why is this important for not only you, but for your audience? And, a lot of people might think that, oh, this is my story. This is all about me. But in actuality, it's all about your audience. Why do you want your audience to connect with you? Why do you want people to join OneUpAction? And so, personally for me, I want people to join OneUpAction because it's such a great organization to learn how to be an activist. And it's such a great, stepping stone for when you're first starting out as an activist. It fosters that learning environment. And it really, creates so many opportunities for people around the world that I don't think other organizations give. And I think that's what makes us so special, is that, we're not just in the US, we're primarily international, actually, and we have so many chapters internationally. And I think a lot of environmental organizations in the US, they focus on maybe these bigger strikes and these bigger actions. But here at OneUpAction, we're all about, the smaller actions, the more in-depth actions, the hyper-local actions. And I think that that's really, key, and what makes us different is because we're getting those youth involved and we're empowering those youth. And we're empowering, maybe youth that aren't necessarily privileged or wouldn't normally have the resources to do those smaller actions. And I'm so passionate about, youth empowerment, women empowerment, and environmental action. And so that's why I want to connect with people and bring them towards our organization and try to get them as involved as possible. And so personally, that's my why. And then the rest is pretty easy to figure out. Once you have your why, the rest comes naturally. So once you figure out why you want to do something, why you want to connect with your audience, the how and the what are going to be pretty easy. So the how is, how are you going to achieve that? How are you going to connect with your audience? How are you going to, do the bulk of what you need to do in order to make the action that you want to happen? And what? So what are you trying to do? What is it going to take to get there? Who are you trying to engage with? Those how and what scenarios are going to come pretty naturally once you figure out why you want to do it and what story are you telling, And so this actually is from a very famous YouTube video. This, golden circle idea is from a famous YouTuber or YouTube video from Simon Sinek, and it's Start With Why. And I would really encourage all of you to go watch that YouTube video and try to connect with Simon and learn more about this golden circle type of model, because I think it's really important, and starting with your why is so important. Like what are your core values? What do you want people to engage with? And this is your why, and then the rest will come naturally. Okay, moving on. So the storytelling process is not about you. It's all about your audience. And so there's a really great acronym called SMARTER. And you have to start with your objective. And the whole saying, work smarter, not harder. If you follow this, rule of SMARTER, it's not going to be very hard to connect with your audience. And if you follow these key tactics, the rest will come pretty easy. So, what does the S stand for? Specific. The M is for measurable. The A is for ambitious. The R is for realistic. The T is for time-based. The E is for exciting. And the R is for recorded. So let's go through the SMARTER acronym and try to, dive deep into what all of this means. So, S. Goals must be specific. You state your goal as clearly as possible so that the expected result is commonly understood and unambiguous. So what this looks like is, don't use insider language, because that is just going to be, that's just going to alienate people that might not be in the know. So, you have to be very specific. You have to be, plain and simple. And you want to make sure that everything you're saying could be commonly understood by someone that's not in the organization already. Okay, moving on. The M is for measurable. So your targets should be measurable. That which you measure will be treasured. How are you measured is how you will perform. So, that which you measure will be treasured is, a saying for if you can, really target a specific audience, or you can say, I want this to happen because XYZ, then that's going to be so much more important than just having, a broad goal of, for example, let's say your broad goal was, I want to get more people into OneUpAction. Okay, that's a good start. But for the M, for, targets should be measurable, let's say your new goal is, I want to get 10 more people in my chapter by the end of this month. And that is measurable, because now you have a specific set number of people that you want to get into your chapter. And you can measure that by how many people you actually do get into your chapter. So that's a good goal, that's a good target. And then moving on to the A, goals should be ambitious. So you want to stretch your goals beyond the expectations of, the people that are maybe higher than you, or, the rest of the people in your organization. So they want to, your goals should be realistic, but also, shoot high. If, let's say, it would be pretty easy for you to get 10 people into the organization in 1 month. Why don't you make it your goal to get 15? And by setting out these ambitious goals, really the sky's the limit when it comes to how effective storytelling can be in really setting up these goals and achieving these goals. And so if they're ambitious already and you have that in your mind, then it's going to be that much easier to actually make those goals happen. So goals must be realistic. Unrealistic goals either way, so either, too easy or too hard, impact motivation, and how you perform in your chapter. So, you don't want to say, I want to get 200 people into my chapter in 1 month. That would be pretty unrealistic. As a climate organization, people are doing other things. Let's say youth are in school or adults have jobs. And so to expect that 200 people are going to join an organization, just one chapter in 1 month, might be a little unrealistic. So you want to make sure that your goals are attainable, but also ambitious. And the T is that targets should be time-based. Decide your timetable for completion and stick to it. So like I said earlier with how they should be measurable, let's say your ambitious goal is getting 15 people into your chapter. You should set a time for when you want those people in your chapter. So let's say it's, the start of the month, and you say, by the end of this month, I want 15 people to join OneUpAction. And so if it's time-based, you're more productive, because if you really stick to that time period and that, the timetable for how fast you're going to complete what you want to do, it's going to come so much easier. And the E is for goals should be exciting. Be passionate and motivational when presenting, this graphic says customer, but presenting to your audience. So you want to be passionate, you want to be engaged, and that's all, in effective storytelling. Because if I were to tell you a story, monotone, and I had no inflections in my voice, or maybe I just didn't care about the subject that I was telling you about, I doubt that if I'm not interested in my subject, you probably wouldn't be either. And so you really want to make sure that the goals and the story that you're telling, you're passionate about. If you're passionate about OneUpAction, then this is going to come pretty naturally to you. Because if you're passionate about getting environmental justice, taking action and things like that, when you're telling people about that, you're automatically going to be passionate. So as an activist, this should come pretty easy to you. And lastly, goals should be recorded. Ensure your goals are written and easy to find. Looking at your goals often will assist in achievement. So if I can just give you guys a little example, I'm going to be applying to college soon. So I made a list of all the different colleges that I'm going to be applying to, and I took pictures off the web and made a little collage of pictures of the different universities that I'm going to be applying to. And I put that little collage right up on my wall in my bedroom, so that every morning when I get up and before I go to bed or whenever I'm sitting at my desk, I look at that little collage of colleges and it motivates me. And I see that so often, and I'm like, yes, that's one of my goals. So in a similar manner, if you want a certain number of people in your chapter, or maybe your goal is to do an action and get a lot of people involved, then write that down somewhere. Post it on social media. Have it in your department group chats. Post it online somewhere. And that way you'll see it often and you'll be motivated when you see it. Okay, moving on. So you need to, sorry about that. So you need to think like your audience. You need to solve a problem that your audience has. And it's really that simple. So you need to figure out who is your audience. In OneUpAction, our audience is primarily youth that are interested in climate action. That's not to say that we don't love having adults in our organization. There are many adults in our organization. But when you're really thinking about, who are your targets? Who are you trying to engage? Here at OneUpAction, it's normally youth. And it's youth that maybe know a lot about climate change but haven't done anything yet. Or maybe they're involved in other organizations and want to join a new one or want to join another one. So maybe they're activists already, or maybe they're not. But, it's people that are passionate about the environment and people that are passionate about environmental justice, social justice, getting rid of environmental racism, small community actions, and even big actions, that span maybe across a whole country or internationally as a, large campaign. So you need to think about people that would be interested in those type of actions or joining a chapter. Okay, so getting people interested. What do I mean by that? Keep it simple in a way that they can understand. So, as I mentioned previously, you don't want to be using any insider, vocabulary when you're first talking to someone about an organization, about OneUpAction specifically. So here at OneUpAction, an example is that we used, the letters OUA, UA, sometimes when we're referring to OneUpAction. So if I'm talking to someone else in the organization, I'll say, hey, this person is the UA chapter lead for, let's say, Mexico. If I were to go out and say that to someone who wasn't in the organization, they would be like, what is UA? What is that? And so you want to keep it pretty plain and simple. You want to say, here at OneUpAction, instead of here at UA or here at OUA. Because if they're automatically confused or they don't know what you're talking about, it's going to alienate them and it's going to make them feel like maybe they don't have enough knowledge to join or maybe they're out of the loop. And that is just going to, create that divide between you and your audience. Okay. Prepare to have a conversation, don't present. So, if you're having a conversation with someone, you're really connecting with them on a deeper level. And that's all about human connection. It's pretty natural to us. If I were to have a conversation with someone and talk the whole time and never let them share their opinion or engage with what I'm saying, or engage with what if I don't engage with what they're saying, then that's a one-sided, that's a presentation. That's not a conversation. And when you're storytelling, it might be easy to kind of get confused with, okay, I need to have my story all set out, and you might get in your head about presenting it. But if you're just having a conversation with someone, it's really pretty easy, and most people can gauge how passionate you are about the environment from a conversation, not from you presenting. And so building that engagement is really key. So you don't want to just talk at people, you want to talk with people. And one of the ways that, is an idea for how to do that is, let's say you post something on social media. And maybe it's a story about how you got involved in your activism. And let's say someone comments on that story. If you really want to provide engagement and get that person maybe involved, or, you want to, engage with their opinion on that post that you posted, if they comment back. Or if someone else, posts something that's interesting to you, comment on theirs and have a conversation. If you post something and someone comments, "Oh, that's super cool," or "I really like what you said about, getting involved," then you would comment back, maybe on social media, on Instagram, and say, "What did you think was cool about that?" Or would you maybe want to have a conversation about, getting involved in your own OneUpAction, or, starting your own activism? So it's really trying to build those conversations with people. And this is pretty easy, but tell a story. So the image here is of the stars, and like I already said, people have been telling stories since humans have existed. There's been chalk on cave walls, and there have been so many traditions passed down through word of mouth and connecting, even sitting with your family at a dinner table. You're telling stories. You're telling stories about your day. Your family's engaging with you. They're saying, "How was your day? How was that conversation with someone?" That's all storytelling. And building those connections, building those human connections, is really what OneUpAction is all about. So this is why this training is really important to us. Okay, so moving on to the storytelling process. So this is really key on, how effective your storytelling is going to be. So if you've ever read a book or a short story, there's always, a progression of how that story goes. And when you're telling a story, it's the same thing. So let's say you were writing a book. This would be the same kind of path that your story would lead on, as, maybe a poem or a book, or if you're just telling someone a story. So it's all very similar, and people have been doing this model since, people have started telling stories. Shakespeare, different, plots in books, different plots in movies, kind of all share the same progression. So let's talk about it. This is known as, a 3-act play, sort of. So you have the setup. It introduces the situation, the characters, and guides us into the main body of the story. So this is your introduction. So you're, saying, where's the story taking place, who's involved, basically what's happening, give us some context, and really introduce us to, what the story is going to be all about. And then you have some ascending action, and you have some sort of plot point. So something happens, something is intriguing, maybe there's a little bit of a plot twist, something that gets the audience engaged. And then you move on to confrontation. So this is the real meat of the story. It's the conflict and the heart of the story. So let's say, in a novel, this is where the, maybe the good guy and the villain, maybe the superhero and the villain finally clash and they have their big fight. Or let's say, realistically, if you're telling a story to someone that you want to get engaged in, maybe your chapter, tell them about your activism story. Maybe this confrontation was about a setback you had, or a failure, or maybe one of your actions didn't go as well as you wanted it to. Or you could even talk about how you were super, you learned so many new facts about, the environmental crisis, that you were maybe in a low point and you had to really come to terms with, how you're going to take action and how you're going to fight against this. And so it's really that confrontation and, kind of the conflict that gets people engaged. Because if it's all, one side, or there's no rising action, it's going to be a little bit of a boring story. Okay, so moving on. The resolution, the outworking of the story. So it kind of descends from there. So let's say, back to the example of the superhero and the villain. let's say they have their huge fight, they finally, come together, and then the resolution was the good guy wins, and he saves a bunch of people. So that would be how the story ends. So let's say you're talking about your climate activism. Let's say you had a setback or one of your actions didn't go as planned. The resolution was, how did you get past that? What did you do differently next time? What were the lessons that you learned? And that's kind of all part of the resolution. And so, as much as this kind of looks like a plot of a book, or a really dramatic play or something, this is how most people tell stories. Even if you're telling a story about your day, let's say, for example, I'm telling a story about my school day. I would go to my parents at the dinner table maybe, and I would say, this happened in the lunchroom and I was with my friends, and then someone said something and there's some type of confrontation, but then we ended up working it out. So that's a super quick example of how most people end up telling stories, but most people don't actually know what they're doing until they see this graphic, and that most stories actually go, in this progression. So it's just nice to learn about it and really, keep in mind that that's how to engage your audience, is by using this method. Okay, moving on. So actually, before I move on, so the setup is to make us believe your story. Maybe talk about your credentials, talk about who you are, set up that story, make us believe that it's true. And then the confrontation is make us care, make your audience invested. If, they're on the edge of their seat maybe about what you did next or how the conflict is resolved, that's going to make them care. And lastly, make sure we are invested in the outcome. So if people care, they're going to be invested, and that adds value to your story. And that ultimately leads people to action, which is one of the key things that are really important for the success of effective storytelling. Okay, so the next step, everyone, is the insight model. And this is really key before you build your story, is to have a strong foundation. And what I mean by this is, by this pyramid shape, you can see that you really need to have a strong idea of what your story is about, how you're framing your story, and things like that before you really get into your call to action. So it all leads to your call to action. So let's talk about this graphic. Okay, so number one is framing. It's getting clear on the question you want to answer to define your scope. So maybe the question that you want to answer is, why would people want to get involved in OneUpAction? Now that might seem pretty broad, but for someone who's not in OneUpAction, this is probably one of the key questions that they'll have. And so if you're doing effective storytelling, in order to create, more engagement for your chapter or to get people involved in your chapter, this might be one of the questions that you think about. So it's really getting clear on what questions do you think your audience will have. So what questions do you want to answer? And then it's going into the facts. So you're gathering the right information to help us understand what's happening. So, it can't all be how you're feeling or, emotional dialect. It also has to have some facts and some information. Like I said before, we're constantly flooded by, a surplus of all of this information daily. But it's really getting to those key facts, the key statistics, to really draw people in. So let's say, you have some really clear data on how the climate crisis is affecting your region. If you go out to people and you tell them that data and they know that it's it for their region, they're going to, be interested, and they're going to be like, wow, that statistic is crazy, or I never knew that. And that's going to get them, interested. And then you move on to insight. So what does that data mean? It's understanding why things are happening. So let's say you have some, data or statistic on deforestation in your country or maybe your region. you have to ask yourself, why is that happening? Why is that data relevant? And how did we get that data? You have to figure out, why is that deforestation happening? Because that's going to be the next question that people ask is, you give them this data and they're like, oh my God, why is this happening? And that's just going to get them super interested if you have the answer right away. And moving on, it's the implication. So what? Okay, so let's say you have some data on deforestation, and then you have some insight on why that deforestation is happening. Maybe it's for, maybe they're knocking down trees because it's some company that just came in, or something like that. And then the implication is, why should we care? And for some people, that's automatically, they care for the environment. But for some other people, they might not know, why that's relevant or why they should care. And so you really have to hone in on why, why your story is important. The so what. So you tell your story and it's like, okay, why did you tell your story? And that goes back to the golden circle model of your why. And this is really the implication part. So you need to, going back to the deforestation model, it's like, okay, this amount of trees are getting, cut down each year. This is happening because, some new company came in that, doesn't take care of the environment. And the reason why you should care about this is because it's harming wildlife, or it's destroying ecosystems that are important to not only those animals and ecosystems, but the people that live around those ecosystems. And so that's how you really connect with people, is like, how does it affect that person that you're saying your story to? Because if they don't have a personal connection to it, they might not be as invested. So the so what is super important. And then the last step is the action. So what now? So let's say you get them really involved, really invested. They're suddenly so passionate about, fighting deforestation. What do they do about it? That part is the, hey, come join our OneUpAction chapter. Or, hey, come to this strike that we're doing. Or come to this action that we have planning. Participate in this campaign that we have running. That action part is also very key. You don't want to start with your action. You want to start with your framing. So that's why this model is super important, because when you're storytelling, you're getting people engaged and you're, making them passionate about the same things like maybe you're passionate about. And then you really get down to the action of, okay, we're both interested in this. We both want to see change. How do we do change? How do we take action? And that's something that you really want to think about. And one of the key points at the end of your story is the what now. What do you do? What do you want your audience to do? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to take action? Do you want them to participate in a campaign you have running? You need to really figure out what action you want your audience to take. And if you're really clear about that, they probably will take it. Okay, moving on. The 5 key questions to a perfect pitch or a perfect story. So, this kind of has a business model for a perfect pitch, but, you're also pitching your actions and you're pitching your campaigns. And so this is also really key when you're storytelling to people. So the 5 key questions are, why are you here? How do I get by? What do I get by doing this? How do I know it is going to work? What does this increase my followers? And what do I do to make this happen? So these questions are very key. And you want to know that you're never selling, you're never, making a sales pitch. You're always engaging with these questions. So, you should have answers on the spot to all of these questions, because you know that someone that you're talking to, someone in your audience, is going to ask at least one of these questions. So you should have the answers to them. You need to know, what do I get by doing this? What are you providing to your audience? is your call to action maybe to join a campaign, and maybe they get to finally, help their community? Or is maybe your call to action donation, and maybe they can't physically support you, but they can support you monetarily? And so what do they get by doing that is really important. So maybe they get the satisfaction of knowing that they helped a great organization, or they, feel inspired to join the climate movement. So these are the types of things that you want to be thinking about, and really have answers to all of these questions before you do your storytelling, or before you, present OneUpAction or present your story of activism to other people. Okay. So in today's environment, you really need a catchy headline for your story. So this is more pertaining to if you're doing your story on Instagram or on social media. Maybe you're doing an op-ed, something online, an article. You really need a catchy storyline, because there is so much information going around right now, and people are constantly flooded with so many different news articles, and people are always scrolling through social media. So what is a compelling headline for the information you are sharing that will entice people to stop their scroll? A lot of us are in quarantine, we're in lockdown right now, just scrolling endlessly through social media. What about your story is going to make them stop and read it and listen? And that's really key. So you want to keep it focused and to the point. You should be able to understand the major themes of the story by the headline alone. So whatever you want your audience to know about your story should be in a short, concise, but super impactful headline. Okay, so this is the storyline structure. So you have your headline, like what I just described. It should be catchy, impactful, engaging. And then you have a short description of what your story is about. So this is a little summary of what your story is, and why people should listen. Quick couple sentences on what your story is mainly going to be about. And then you have your data and your insight. So this is like the pyramid model that I talked about earlier. Is you need some stats and some statistics, but your story shouldn't just be that. If I just threw a lot of data at you and didn't tell you what it meant, or didn't describe it at all, you would probably be confused. And I think anyone would probably be confused if they just got data thrown at them. So the key part of this is insight. What does that data mean? How does it affect your audience? How does it impact the people that you're trying to target? And if you can create, the why and the how, but that goes along with your data, that's super important. And then you have your call to action. So this is just a structure of, if you're writing out your story online for maybe a website or an article or a social media post, this is the structure that you want to follow to make sure that your storytelling is, as effective as possible. And then moving on, some simple guides for connecting with people. So you really want to be emotional. You don't want to be scared of sharing emotions. Maybe the topic that you're talking about makes you super passionate, or maybe it makes you angry. If you're talking about deforestation and you're talking about, how environments are being destroyed, I think it's perfectly reasonable that, part of your story is talking about how, mad you were, how angry you are, or maybe you're scared of a possibility, maybe you're scared of the future because of the climate crisis. Those emotions are totally valid and should definitely be in your story, along with the positive ones. Maybe after your resolution was that, you joined OneUpAction and you were inspired and you were hopeful, and those are all amazing emotions too that you should be willing to share with your audience. Your story should be surprising at some points. If you don't want your story to be boring. So maybe there's not, some crazy turning point in your story. But if you make it act like it, and the inflections in your voice, and maybe you throw in some type of plot twist, you want to really get your audience engaged. And you want to be personable. So what I mean by this is, the way that your voice comes across and the way that your passion comes across should be like you're having a conversation, even if you're writing a story online for an article or something like that. It should be very conversational and, not monotone, and try to be as friendly and conversational as possible. And then you want to be genuine. Authenticity is key at OneUpAction. We strive to always be, genuine in our actions and in our words, and that should really reflect across all of our chapters. And so we want you to be as authentic as possible. We also want you to be invested. The climate crisis is such a interesting topic that people get really passionate about, and that passion should supersede, the story that you're telling. It should just be so blatant, because if you're in OneUpAction, we are hoping that you are so invested in solving the climate crisis, or at least taking some actions to help do so. And then you want your story to be visual. So maybe, include some descriptions of, where you were at the time of your story, what your surrounding was, really add in some of that imagery to make it super interesting. And lastly, you want to connect with empathy. So if, your story is all about you, then it probably won't connect or resonate with your audience. You want to have empathy with what your audience is going through, maybe how they're feeling on that day, how the climate crisis affects them, and things like that, so you can connect with them on a deeper level. Okay, so to close off, what did you learn, and what are you going to do differently? So we do have our live Zoom tomorrow, and I would like you to, maybe write down some things that you learned, or some things that, really resonated with you through this training, or any questions you may have, so we can talk about it in our live Zoom tomorrow. And I really hope you guys, got some key information from this training and are going to benefit from it. And I can't wait to see what you guys do with, this 6-week training course. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this training. So thank you so much for tuning in to week 2 of How to Be an Activist 101. We're so happy to have you on our team, and I can't wait for you to listen in on the other training courses that we have. Thank you.